The galaxy was at war. Far from the peaceful days of cooperation, the universe was being torn apart by the arrival of a ruthless alien race known as the Vorath. These creatures, larger than any human, with thick, armored skin and weapons that could wipe out entire cities in a single strike, swept through the stars, destroying everything in their path. The galaxy's powerful and advanced species, the ones that had once dominated the stars, now found themselves helpless before the Vorath's fury. World after world fell silent as the last signals of resistance faded. The Galactic Council, which had once been a symbol of unity between species, became a gathering of cowards. The Council's leaders were the first to flee, abandoning their positions, their planets, and their people. They retreated to distant space stations or faraway planets away from the war, leaving everyone else to face the Vorath alone. The message that was broadcast across the galaxy was clear. We are leaving. You are on your own. The Vorath's attack had shaken the very core of the galaxy. Planets burned, civilizations crumbled, and the once proud alliance of species that made up the Council was now a shadow of its former self. But one planet did not cower. One species did not run. Earth. Humanity was different. Earth had always been a place of fierce survival, of relentless determination. Humans had faced wars of their own, both on their home planet and across the stars. They had fought wars for freedom, for survival, and for peace, only to find themselves once again staring into the face of another, larger war. But unlike the others, humanity wasn't going to flee. When the galaxy's leaders turned their backs, Earth stood tall. The President of the United States, the leader of humanity's largest and most influential nation, stood before the world, her voice trembling with the weight of the moment. She addressed her people and the galaxy at large, promising humanity would never bow to the Vorath. Others may run, she declared, but we will fight. We will not let fear rule our hearts. We will stand and face this darkness together. Humanity is not a species that runs. We are a species that fights. Her words sparked a fire within the hearts of humans all around the world. Across continents, from the bustling cities of New York to the quiet villages in the mountains of Nepal, people gathered united by a single cause: survival. The global reaction was a mixture of fear, confusion, and determination. Many wondered if humanity, a species that had been isolated from the larger galactic conflicts for so long, could stand against the Vorath. They weren't part of the Galactic Council. They had no advanced technology like the other species, who had spent centuries mastering space travel and weapons. But they had something else, something no other species had: human spirit. Across Earth, from military leaders to scientists, engineers to everyday civilians, plans began to form. There was no time to waste. The Vorath were coming, and humanity needed to prepare. Earth's military forces scattered across the globe began to consolidate. Nations dropped their borders, their differences, and formed a unified front. The United Nations, once an organization of diplomats and peacekeepers, now became the center of a military operation. The task was clear: hold Earth. Human engineers, often working with little more than their wits and limited technology, began to rapidly develop new defense systems. They worked day and night, assembling weapons of mass destruction, powerful energy shields, and automated defense turrets, things that hadn't even existed weeks before. They used what they had, what they knew, and began to push the limits of human ingenuity. The global economy shifted. Factories that once produced consumer goods now produced weapons. Every man and woman capable of serving was conscripted into the military. Schools were repurposed into training grounds, and the public became increasingly involved in the war effort. Humanity, once divided by borders, ideologies, and religions, found a new unity. The survival of the species was at stake. The first few days after the announcement were filled with chaos. Some cities were torn apart by panic, while others saw a surge in community spirit. Across Earth there were protests, but they weren't about the war. They were about the human right to fight. People wanted to know they weren't alone. And they weren't. Humanity's greatest asset wasn't just their technological advancements or military might. It was their refusal to give in, to bend before an enemy just because they were stronger or larger. The Vorath might have been a giant species of terror, but humanity had always survived against overwhelming odds. Among the first to volunteer were the soldiers. Earth's elite military units, such as the U.S. Navy SEALs, Russia's Spetsnaz, China's Special Forces, and others began to prepare for the unthinkable, space warfare. Their training shifted from earthbound tactics to new forms of combat. They adapted to the weightlessness of space and the technology they'd never used before. They weren't the only ones getting ready. Civilians, too, took part in the preparation. They dug into the earth to build shelters, stockpiled supplies, and created plans for survival. The global war effort was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. For all the preparation, the true battle had not yet begun. Earth had a military, but so did the Vorath, and their first wave of attack was approaching. Earth's space stations began to report signs of the alien fleet moving towards the planet. The galaxy's remaining species watched in silence. They'd fled. They had all abandoned Earth, each one too afraid to stand and fight. But humanity had refused to yield. Earth was alone, but that didn't matter. They didn't need the help of the others. They only needed themselves. And so, humanity began to prepare for the ultimate test. The leaders of Earth had spoken, and their words rang out across the planet. Humanity would not bow to the Vorath. There would be no retreat, no surrender. They would fight. Every corner of Earth had been set ablaze with determination, and the Akwai, resolved to protect their home, had spread like wildfire. But this was no easy task. Humanity had never faced a threat like the Vorath. The alien species were far more powerful, their weapons capable of wiping out entire cities with a single blow. They were a force unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Yet, the world stood united in its decision to resist, even in the face of such overwhelming odds. As the message of defiance spread across the globe, Earth's leaders knew that the coming war would change everything. It wasn't just about defending a planet anymore. It was about the survival of the human race itself. For centuries, humanity had been part of a peaceful galactic community, but the galaxy had turned its back on them. Now it was humanity's time to stand alone. Across every continent, the people of Earth began to prepare. Governments declared martial law, and every major city turned into a hub for military and civilian coordination. It wasn't just soldiers who were needed. It was everyone. Factories that had once produced toys, clothes, and electronics were now being converted into war factories. The world's economies shifted overnight, and humanity began to focus all of its energy on the one goal: survival. In the United States, the government mobilized its military forces. President Sarah Wells addressed the nation with a calm, determined voice, speaking directly to the people who had placed their trust in her leadership. "We are not alone in this fight," she said. "But we are the only ones who can truly protect ourselves. We will not allow anyone, not the Vorath, not the galaxy, to erase us. Together, we will rise to this challenge. Together, we will protect our future." Her words echoed in every home, every school, and every military base. They were more than a message of hope. They were a rallying cry. Across the country, men and women, young and old, volunteered to serve. No one was left untouched by the urgency of the situation. Even the civilians who weren't directly involved in the military began to take action, preparing their homes and families for the worst. It wasn't long before the military began to form strategies. The top generals of Earth's armed forces met with their brightest minds, engineers, scientists, and strategists. The task was clear. Earth had to be defended, and they had to fight back in a way no one expected. Human ingenuity was their greatest weapon. Earth's military had never been equipped to face an enemy like the Vorath, but humans had something that the aliens did not: adaptability. They might not have had the advanced weaponry or the space fleets of the galactic species, but they had the ability to learn and innovate at an astonishing rate. In less than a month, the world's top scientists had already begun developing new technologies. laser-guided missiles, energy shields, and even cloaking devices. Humanity's ability to adapt quickly to new technology would be crucial in the coming battle. Meanwhile, humanity's military leaders knew that the first battle would be one of survival. The Vorath were coming, and they had no intention of stopping. Earth's defenses were being rapidly built, but they wouldn't be enough to stop an invasion of that magnitude. The global effort to create a unified military force was underway, and soldiers, pilots, and engineers began their grueling training. In the United Kingdom, General Olivia James, a seasoned military officer, led the charge in the formation of Earth's first space defense fleet. "We have no choice but to face them head-on," she told her fellow commanders. "We will not wait for them to destroy us. We will go to them, and we will make sure they regret ever setting their sights on Earth." General James's words became the rallying cry for the fleet, and within weeks, Earth's military began to take shape. Soldiers trained in zero-gravity combat, pilots familiarized themselves with new spacecraft, and engineers worked round the clock to perfect Earth's new weaponry. But not all of humanity's challenges were external. Internally, fear and doubt began to rise. Some people questioned whether humanity could really fight against the Vorath, who were capable of wiping out entire civilizations in days. They wondered whether the human spirit, no matter how strong, could really withstand the might of such an enemy. At a military command center in Japan, Commander Kaito Takeda gathered his fellow officers to discuss the growing tension. He understood the fear, but he refused to let it spread. "Fear will not win this war," he said. "We are not fighting for a single country. We are fighting for all of humanity. If we give in to fear now, we lose everything. We must stand strong. Together, we will face the Vorath and show them that they have made the worst mistake of their lives." His speech resonated with his officers. They had come to realize that the fate of Earth was not in the hands of any one nation, but in the collective will of all of humanity. People across the world were coming together as never before. The lines that had divided them, geography, politics, culture, no longer mattered. All that mattered now was survival. As Earth's forces continued to prepare for war, new reports came in from the front lines. The Vorath had begun their assault on neighboring planets, and their advanced ships were moving closer to Earth. The reports sent waves of anxiety through the human leadership. Earth was now officially in the crosshairs of the Vorath, and time was running out. The battle for Earth would soon begin. President Wells held an emergency meeting with the United Nations. The room was filled with representatives from every corner of the world, all of them tense but determined. "We have no choice," she said. "The time for waiting is over. Humanity must make its stand. This is not just a war for our survival. This is a war for the future of all who follow us. We will show the galaxy what it means to fight for freedom." Across the world, humanity prepared for war. The next few days would determine whether Earth would be wiped from the galaxy's map, or if they would stand as an example to all who had abandoned them. The Vorath were coming, but humanity would not run. They would fight. This marks part 2, where humanity begins to mobilize for war. People of all nations unite, pushing aside their differences to face the enormous threat posed by the Vorath. Earth's military leaders strategize, soldiers train, and civilians prepare for the battle that will determine their future. The days of peace were long gone. Earth's cities had been transformed into bustling centers of military preparation. Once they were places of everyday life, where people went to work, school, or spent time with their families. Now those cities hummed with the sound of urgency. Soldiers marching, engineers working, and civilians contributing to the war effort. Across the world, the human army was being built. The nations that had once been divided now stood united, all focused on one goal: to defend Earth from the Vorath. But humanity's task was enormous. They were facing an enemy unlike any they had ever encountered. The Vorath were massive, their technology far superior to anything humans had. And yet, humans had something the Vorath did not: an indomitable will to survive. The training of Earth's military began at full speed. Soldiers who had never seen combat were now learning how to fight with cutting-edge weapons and how to survive in the harshest conditions. It wasn't just physical strength that was important, it was mental toughness. Soldiers needed to be able to face their fear and uncertainty, to stand firm against the terror that the Vorath would bring. General Olivia James, the commander of Earth's Space Defense Fleet, knew that the first wave of soldiers would be crucial. "We're not just fighting a war," she told her troops. "We're fighting for our survival. You will be the shield that protects Earth, and when you stand on that battlefield, you will be the face of humanity's resistance." Her words echoed across every training ground. The soldiers, young and old, understood what was at stake. This was no ordinary fight. It was a fight for their future, their children, their very way of life. As they trained, they pushed themselves, harder than they ever had before, knowing that the fate of Earth rested on their shoulders. At a military base in Canada, soldiers were put through rigorous drills. The icy winds of the north became the perfect place to prepare for the unknown conditions of battle. Lieutenant Sarah Bennett, a newly assigned officer, watched as her squad trained with heavy combat gear and specialized weapons. They had only weeks to prepare for an enemy that was capable of wiping out cities with a single attack. "It's not about how fast we can fire our weapons," Lieutenant Bennett said to her squad. "It's about how fast we can adapt, how fast we can think under pressure. The Vorath may be stronger, but they don't know how to outthink us. That's our advantage." The soldiers nodded. They weren't afraid anymore. They were determined. They were learning, adapting, and growing stronger with each passing day. The physical challenges were tough, but the mental challenges were even tougher. They knew they had to be ready for anything. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, in Japan, a group of engineers worked around the clock to develop new technologies. They had no choice but to innovate. Earth's existing military technology wasn't enough to face the Vorath. They worked with limited resources but used their ingenuity to create new weapons and defenses. The most significant breakthrough came when scientists developed a new type of energy shield. Unlike the bulky, inefficient shields used by the aliens, these new shields were compact and highly effective. They could be deployed in a matter of seconds and could withstand even the most powerful attacks. Engineers in every country worked together, using the latest advancements in physics and technology to create the best defense systems they could. Captain Kaito Takeda, a seasoned fighter who had fought in Earth's previous wars, had been assigned to oversee the development of Earth's new weaponry. He knew how important these new technologies would be in the upcoming fight. He worked closely with the engineers, offering feedback based on his experience and pushing them to create more advanced systems. "You have to remember," he said to his team, "we're not just trying to stop the Vorath. We're trying to outsmart them. They've never faced an enemy like us, and we're going to make sure they know it." As the weapons were tested, the soldiers trained harder, honing their skills with the new technology. Some of them trained in simulators, running through battle scenarios, and learning how to operate the advanced machinery. Others trained in hand-to-hand combat because they knew that the Vorath didn't just use technology, they were fierce fighters too. But it wasn't just soldiers and engineers who were preparing. The entire world was involved in the effort. Civilians all over Earth volunteered to help in any way they could. Women and men worked in factories, building weapons, armor, and equipment. Farmers began to grow extra food for the soldiers. Even children helped by spreading messages of hope and unity, encouraging their parents and neighbors to keep pushing forward. The military wasn't just about fighting, it was about coordination. Each branch of the armed forces, from the Army to the Navy to the Air Force, had to work together seamlessly. General James oversaw the integration of all the military branches into one unified fighting force. The success of their fight against the Vorath would depend on their ability to work as a single unit, rather than as separate armies. "We're a single family now," General James told her team. "Every soldier, every engineer, every civilian, they are all part of this fight. This is not just about military success, it's about the success of humanity." The message spread, and it reached the hearts of every soldier, every engineer, and every civilian. They weren't just fighting for their homes or their countries, they were fighting for the survival of the human race. The training was grueling, and as the days turned into weeks, the soldiers became more and more prepared. But no one knew when the Vorath would arrive. The enemy was out there, watching, waiting. The anticipation built, and the pressure grew. Every day was a reminder that the clock was ticking down. At the end of each training day, as the soldiers gathered for rest, they would look up at the sky, wondering when the battle would come. Some were nervous, but most were filled with a quiet, determined resolve. They were ready. Humanity was ready. And when the Vorath arrived, they would be ready to stand firm. In the final days before the battle, a message was broadcast across the globe. President Wells addressed the people of Earth one last time. Her voice was calm but filled with unwavering confidence. We have trained, we have prepared, and we will fight. We fight for our homes, for our families, for our children. We fight not just for ourselves, but for every species in the galaxy who has ever been forgotten or abandoned. This is our time to show the galaxy who we truly are. The final preparations were made, and Earth's military was ready. It was time for the battle to begin. This marks part 3, where the human army undergoes intense training, preparing themselves both physically and mentally to face the Vorath. The emphasis on human adaptability and ingenuity continues, with people across Earth contributing to the war effort. Every moment of training brings them closer to the inevitable battle. Earth had been preparing for weeks, if not months, for this moment. The soldiers were trained, the weapons were ready, and the defense systems were in place. Now, all of humanity stood united, waiting for the Vorath to arrive. The whole world held its breath. The silence was thick with anticipation, but it wouldn't last long. The first reports came in from Earth's space stations. The Vorath fleet had been spotted on the edge of the solar system. They were enormous, more ships than Earth had ever seen in its worst nightmares. Each one was a warship of terror, capable of destroying entire planets in a matter of days. General Olivia James watched the live feed in the command center, her heart pounding. The tension in the room was almost unbearable. The humans had never faced anything like this. There was no room for failure. "Get ready," she said, her voice calm but firm. "This is it." The fleet moved slowly toward Earth, their advance, a terrifying sight in the blackness of space. The larger ships were made of dark, reflective metal, their surface marked with strange symbols that no human had ever seen before. They had no idea what those symbols meant, but they didn't need to. The message was clear. The Vorath had come to conquer Earth. Back on the ground, Earth's defense forces were on high alert. The air was thick with tension as soldiers took their positions. Every soldier knew their role. The weapons had been tested, the shields calibrated, and the battle plans set. Now all they had to do was wait for the Vorath to make their move. The first wave of attack came suddenly. Earth's satellites and defense stations picked up the movement of smaller scout ships. They were fast, darting across the sky at impossible speeds. The humans' first defense line, a network of automated drones, immediately activated and began launching attacks. The air around the scouts shimmered as lasers and missiles tore through space. The battle was fierce, but the Vorath were unlike anything humanity had ever faced. Their ships were agile, moving with an almost unnatural precision. Despite the best efforts of Earth's defenses, the Vorath ships were too powerful. The drones were outmatched. A few of the scout ships were destroyed, but the majority broke through. "We need to engage in hand-to-hand combat," Captain Kaito Takeda ordered over the intercom. "Activate the fleet. We need to show them we're not just sitting ducks." The humans' fleet, now ready to deploy, surged forward. For the first time, human ships and Vorath ships clashed in the cold void of space. The human fleet wasn't large, but it was fast, and every ship had been built for this moment. They relied on maneuverability and speed rather than brute force. The goal wasn't to match the Vorath in strength. It was to outsmart them, to use their ingenuity to gain the upper hand. The first battle in space was chaotic. Explosions lit up the void as the ships exchanged fire. Earth's ships dodged and weaved, launching missiles and laser beams that struck the Vorath ships. The Vorath retaliated with overwhelming force, but humanity's ships were designed to be agile and precise. Each hit from Earth's fleet was a calculated strike aimed at weakening the Vorath's firepower. On the ground, the military forces readied themselves. Soldiers were stationed across the globe, ready for the next phase. The real battle hadn't even begun yet. The Vorath would eventually land, and that was when the true fight would start. But for now, the fight in space was humanity's first victory. As the battle raged on above Earth, the Vorath began to deploy their ground forces. The reports came in fast and furious. The Vorath had landed on the outskirts of major cities, their massive transports delivering legions of soldiers. These soldiers were as terrifying as their ships, large, powerful beings with armor thick enough to resist most human weaponry. The time for humanity's military to truly prove itself had arrived. "We need to move quickly," General James said, her voice steady, though she could feel the weight of the moment bearing down on her. "Prepare for ground deployment." Across the world, soldiers geared up, putting on their combat armor and checking their weapons. The military's objective was clear: hold the line at all costs. Earth's defenses had been designed to delay the Vorath's advance long enough for the military to mobilize. Humanity's ground forces weren't ready for the full might of the Vorath, but they had one thing the Vorath didn't: human spirit. The first battle on Earth began in the city of New York. The Vorath landed outside the city, their massive war machines rolling across the landscape. Their weapons fired with terrifying force, leveling buildings and leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. The human forces were positioned along the city's outskirts, behind barricades and makeshift defenses. They weren't ready to take on an army of this size, but they had no choice. The Vorath had come to wipe them out. Captain Kaido Takeda led the charge, his unit moving swiftly through the streets. His soldiers were armed with high-powered rifles, energy shields, and explosive devices designed to take down the Vorath's machines. They set traps using the city's layout to their advantage. It wasn't a direct assault. They couldn't match the Vorath in terms of firepower, but they could outsmart them. The first clash was brutal. The Vorath marched into the city with their massive armored soldiers, firing their energy weapons at anything that moved. The human forces fought back, firing with precision and hitting weak spots in the Vorath's armor. Explosions rocked the streets as human fighters launched grenades and high-powered missiles. It wasn't easy. The Vorath were strong, and they were relentless. But humanity didn't back down. They fought with everything they had. Soldiers worked in teams, using guerrilla tactics to confuse the Vorath and keep them off balance. They fought for every inch of the city, knowing that if they lost New York, it would be a blow to Earth's entire defense effort. As the battle raged on, the tide began to shift. The Vorath had underestimated humanity's resolve. They had expected an easy victory, but humanity was proving them wrong. The streets of New York became a battlefield, but Earth soldiers held their ground. In the end, the Vorath were forced to retreat. The city was in ruins, but humanity had won its first battle on the ground. The victory was small, but it was a victory nonetheless. This marks part 4, where humanity faces its first direct encounter with the Vorath. The battle begins in space, with human forces holding their own against the advanced alien technology. The fight moves to the ground, and the human spirit shines through as Earth soldiers use tactics and ingenuity to fight back. It's the beginning of humanity's resistance, a fight for survival. The news of humanity's unexpected success spread like wildfire across the galaxy. No one had believed that humans could stand against the Vorath, let alone drive them back from their cities. But now, Earth had proved them wrong. The first major battle had ended in a victory for humanity, and the whole galaxy watched in awe. For days, the galaxy's most advanced species had watched Earth struggle from a distance. They had abandoned the planet, fleeing to their own systems, leaving Earth to face the Vorath alone. But the tide had changed. Humanity, with its fierce determination and unyielding spirit, had managed to hold its ground. And now some species began to reconsider their stance. The first to respond were the Zorath, a race of peaceful explorers who had long held a position of neutrality in the galaxy. They were not warriors, but they had advanced technology that could aid Earth in its fight. The Zorath's message was simple. They would offer their help, but only if Earth accepted it. President Sarah Wells received the message with mixed emotions. The Zorath were a peaceful race, But they were also one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Their technology could help Earth, but there was a catch. The Zorath had been part of the Galactic Council, the very group that had abandoned Earth in its time of need. Would their help be a sign of true alliance, or was it an attempt to cover up their earlier failure? "We cannot afford to be picky," President Wells said as she read the message. "They're offering help and we need it. Let's make sure we don't turn it down out of pride." In the weeks that followed, the Zorath sent their best engineers and scientists to Earth. They brought advanced medical technologies, powerful energy weapons, and new designs for ships that could help turn the tide of war. Their arrival was met with a mixture of gratitude and suspicion. Humanity's leaders were eager to accept the help, but there were whispers among the military that they could not fully trust the Zorath, given their abandonment of Earth in the first place. While Earth received the Zorath's help, another, unexpected message arrived. The Vrel, a race of fierce warriors known for their skill in hand-to-hand combat, contacted Earth. Unlike the Zorath, the Vrel had never been part of the Galactic Council. They were a proud, independent species, and they had always stayed out of galactic politics. But they had been watching the humans fight the Vorath, and they were impressed by their courage. "We will fight with you, humans," said the leader of the Vrel, an imposing figure named General Karor. "The Vorath have taken enough from our people, and we will not let them conquer yours." The Vrel were a welcome sight. They had a reputation for being some of the best warriors in the galaxy, and their fighting skills could make a difference on the ground. Earth's military welcomed them with open arms, but the arrival of these new allies also brought with it a new challenge. While the Vrel were powerful, they had a very different way of doing things. Their focus was on close combat and tactical warfare. They didn't understand the way humanity fought, and their methods were not always compatible with Earth's strategies. The human military leaders, especially General Olivia James, had to quickly learn to work with the Vrel, incorporating their combat techniques into Earth's existing strategies. It wasn't easy. The first few joint training exercises were full of misunderstandings. The Vrel's style of warfare was aggressive, with little regard for conventional tactics. They preferred to charge into battle with overwhelming force, while humans relied more on strategy and technology. The two groups struggled to find common ground, but they had no choice. They needed to work together if they were going to defeat the Vorath. "There's no time to waste," General James said during one of the training sessions. "We'll figure this out as we go, but we need to be ready for when the Vorath come again." Slowly, the two forces began to work together. The Vrel taught the humans how to fight with more raw power and aggression, while the humans taught the Vrel how to use their advanced technology and tactical planning. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Meanwhile, back in space, Earth's fleet had been bolstered by the new ships and weapons brought by the Zorath. The human forces, once vastly outmatched, now stood on more equal footing with the Vorath. Earth's fleet had become faster, more agile, and better equipped. With the help of the Zorath, humanity had managed to upgrade their ships to withstand the Vorath's firepower. The next battle would be in space again, but this time, humanity was ready. General Olivia James knew that it was not enough to rely on the Vrel and the Zorath. Earth needed to prove once and for all that humanity was not just a defenseless species. They needed to show the galaxy that they were a force to be reckoned with. The Vorath, meanwhile, were not unaware of the shift in power. Their scouts had been watching Earth's every move. They had seen the new ships, the reinforcements, and the growing alliance between Earth and its new allies. But the Vorath were not a race to be easily intimidated. They were ruthless, and they had no intention of losing. The next battle would be even more brutal. The Vorath were gathering their forces, and they knew that if they didn't crush Earth's resistance now, they might never have the chance again. The Vorath prepared to launch their next wave of attacks, and this time, they weren't just coming for Earth, they were coming for the galaxy. But humanity wasn't afraid. The Zorath, the Vrel, and the human forces were ready. They knew that the battle ahead would be the most difficult yet, but they had something the Vorath didn't: unity. Together, they were stronger than they had ever been before. This marks Part 5, where Earth receives help from two alien species. the Zorath and the Vrel, who offer assistance in the fight against the Vorath. While the alliances are uneasy at first, the necessity of survival pushes humanity and their allies to work together. The stage is set for a larger confrontation, with humanity ready to face the Vorath again. Omini,